This presentation is an analysis of Joel Chandler Harris's story, Free Joe and the Rest of the World. Encouraged by the popularity of his Uncle Remus tales, Harris broadened his subject matter to address the problems of Reconstruction in the South after the Civil War in Free Joe and Other Georgian Sketches. Free Joe and the Rest of the World is one of the local color stories included in the collection. The story's setting is Hillsborough, Georgia in 1860, right before the Civil War and the end of slavery. Free Joe and the Rest of the World illustrates the tenuous position of African Americans and the impoverished whites in rural Georgia before the Civil War, as well as Harris's strong desire for the country's reconciliation. The story uses local color by using both black and white Southern Georgia dialect, being set in an area in which the author grew up, and revealing the tensions and views towards race that were prevalent in this time period. It also depicts a way of life, slavery in the antebellum South, that is in the process of dying out. The protagonist, Free Joe, is a freed slave who is isolated due to his status as being free. The other slaves are jealous of his freedom, and the white community begrudgingly acknowledges his humanity. The title of the story, Free Joe and the Rest of the World, emphasizes his alienation, as if he is separate from everyone else in the world. Free Joe is described as lonely and sad. He is a faithful husband and is close to his dog, as he spends night after night waiting under the poplar tree for his wife Lucinda and his dog Dan to return after she has been sent off to another plantation. Other characters in the novel include Free Joe's wife Lucinda, whom he is allowed to see only twice a week and then not at all after the death of his first guardian. Judge Wellington is Free Joe's first guardian and the owner of Joe's wife Lucinda. He also wins a card game with Free Joe's first owner. Major Frampton is Free Joe's first owner. He loses everything he has except for his personal servant Joe by gambling with Judge Wellington. He frees Joe just before shooting out his brains. Spite Calderwood, or Old Spite, is the cruel slave owner that inherits Lucinda after Judge Wellington dies. He ships her off to another plantation and has Free Joe's dog, Dan, shot after he realizes that Free Joe has been visiting Lucinda twice a week. John Evans is Free Joe's new guardian after Judge Wellington dies. Spite Calderwood rips up the pass he has written for Free Joe, giving him permission to visit Lucinda. Makaja and Becky Staley are the elderly poor white brother and sister who allow Free Joe to wait near their home for Joe's wife Lucinda. They are somewhat kind to Free Joe, sometimes offering him coffee and letting him know what they know about Lucinda's whereabouts. Becky shows sympathy towards Free Joe, despite her obvious prejudice against black people, when she says, "I've seed a heap of white people, lots meaner'n Free Joe. He grins, and that's nigger, but I've ketched his underjaw a-tremblin' when Lucindy's name was brought up." Free Joe is not really free, nor is he happy, as one would expect he would be with having been set free. He is extremely poor. Although legally free, he must have a white guardian. He is not even allowed to visit his wife freely. Spite Calderwood is able to simply rip up his pass, giving him permission to visit her without recourse. Harris's depiction of the slaves as singing, dancing, and happy, contrasting with Free Joe's loneliness and sadness, feeds into a white post-Civil War stereotype that slaves were better off with their white owners than free. But Harris also shows great sympathy towards Joe, whom he illustrates as loving and devoted to both his wife and dog by the vigils he holds waiting for their return to the poplar tree night after night until his sad death alone under the tree. Harris also shows sympathy for Free Joe when he suggests his salvation, since Joe is smiling when he died, and the story ends up saying that the humble creature had been summoned as a witness before the Lord God of hosts. Is the story racist? African-American author Alice Walker, who is also from Eatonton, Georgia, protested that Harris had stolen her African-American folklore heritage and had made it into a white man's publishing commodity. However, other African-American authors, such as Zora Neale Hurston, Ralph Ellison, and Toni Morrison, have all praised the work of Joel Chandler Harris. Is the story racist? Some believe the underlying suggestion that Free Joe was better off as a slave makes it racist, and yet others point out that the author is very sympathetic towards Free Joe, whom he depicts as devoted to his wife, suffering from extreme poverty, and a sad and lonely victim of circumstance who has no control over his own life. The fact that the story suggests that Free Joe will be rewarded in the afterlife because he is smiling in death and because he is said to have been summoned as a witness before the Lord God of hosts suggests that the author is sympathetic to the injustices inflicted upon African Americans before the end of the Civil War.